Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Tonight is our second community briefing. As many of you know, this is a new format that we're trying to provide information to the community during the COVID public health emergency, but also simply in relation to things that are happening within the city that may be of interest to you and also to community groups with which you're involved. This evening, I want to let you know at the end of our presentation and comments, we will have time for Q&A. If you would like to submit a question, please do that in the moderator chat, and Deputy City Manager Anuj Gupta will help to receive those questions and to moderate a conversation if there are questions out there. I want to start this evening by taking the opportunity to let all of you know that I have appointed Susan Klein, the city's former Public Works Director, to be acting Assistant City Manager in the City Manager's office with me. What that means to all of you as community members is that the former director of our largest department is now working across the city as we look to vaccination of our city staff and reopening of city facilities, city programs, and working through the very difficult budget and other citywide questions and challenges that are before us. So you'll hear from Susan a little later this evening about vaccination, but I want to welcome her to the city manager's office. She is someone I have great faith in. As many of you know, she is very, very strong on operations. She knows our staff, she knows our facilities, and she knows the issues and matters that matter most to our community members. The somewhat small issues that truly impact our community members' lives. So when we look at the services we provide, Susan is someone who knows them back and forth across departments and is now working and helping and supporting me and Deputy City Manager Anuj Gupta as we work to create a city manager's office that truly supports the community services that you most directly rely on. And with that, I'm going to turn to our Chief Resilience Officer, Lindsay Call, to talk a little bit about where we are on COVID.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for allowing us to provide an update on the COVID-19 situation. We are still very much in a public health emergency, although the conditions have been improving the past 2 weeks or so. Currently, we're seeing about 4,000 to 5,000 new cases per day. That is good news when we've been having 8,000 cases and more throughout December and early January. It is good news. We're trending in the right direction. However, we still have a long ways to go. For context, in September of 2020, we were at 1,000 cases per day. So we have a little bit of improvement still to make. Our testing positivity rate is at 10%. And one of the lingering effects of the COVID-19 surge that we experienced is we still have a very high daily death rate, averaging about 200 deaths per day. Next slide. This chart is available on LA County Department of Public Health's website, and it shows the 3-day average of hospitalized COVID-19 patients. Right now, we have about 5,300 hospitalized COVID-19 patients per day. There has been a steady decline over the last 2 weeks, which is great news for our hospitals, including our local facilities. Approximately 27% of those hospitalized with COVID-19 are in our ICU. Again, even though we are improving, we need to make sure we're protecting our healthcare system and continue to have progress with lowering our cases. Next slide. This chart and map was available on the New York Times website. It was a recently published article showing the inequities that exist across LA County. Of note, we have 2 times the amount of cases new cases among our Latino and Latinx residents throughout Los Angeles County, and it is significantly different than our other racial groups. You can see the graphs on the right shows the differences between cities, with Santa Monica being highlighted, 1 in 23 residents being infected with COVID-19, compared to a city like East Los Angeles, where 1 in 5 residents have been impacted. This reflects several different things, but also highlights the inequities that exist even without COVID, such as the people who are working frontline jobs, access to healthcare, and the such. Next slide. We, as part of the Emergency Operations Center, we pay special attention to what is occurring locally on the west side to ensure that what we're doing in Santa Monica is consistent with our neighboring cities and that we're not having a COVID-19 case spike that is significantly different than what the region is experiencing. I think my slide just disappeared. Due to that, the chart that was shown, and I don't know if everyone else can see it or not, it shows that Santa Monica is on trend and has been experiencing the same number of cases across our geographic region as other West Side cities. I would say next slide, but I can't see any slides. Still can't see any slides, but I'm just going to go ahead and keep moving on if that's okay. So what's open in LA County, and apologies for the delay and confusion. So the biggest change that happened last Friday was a new health officer order was issued. The biggest sector changes were to restaurants. Now outdoor dining is allowed. Personal care services are now open with reduced occupancy for services, and motels and hotels are now available to take reservations for tourism. A big thing for restaurants to note is that 8 feet distance between tables is required no matter if barriers are in place to increase the distancing between tables. Signs are required to inform restaurants that a maximum of 6 people can occupy 1 table and that all diners should be from the same household. There are also more stringent rules in place for mask wearing when diners are not actively eating or drinking. No televisions are allowed, especially during Sunday's Super Bowl, to avoid crowds and gathering, yelling during sporting events. And then all staff interacting with customers must wear both a face covering and a face shield. Next slide. You may have heard about the different COVID-19 variants that are existing throughout throughout the United States and the world. The UK variant has been detected in LA County, which it can spread more easily from person to person. The key in stopping this variant and having it, develop roots within the Los Angeles County region in California is to lower our overall COVID-19 cases and eliminating opportunities for transmission across the board. This makes face coverings even more essential, and we want to advocate that those face coverings need to be at least 2 to 3 layers, and that the public really consider wearing a double mask, especially if they're in a high density location like a grocery store or a crowded indoor place. Dr. Fauci just shared on CNN today that the CDC is also looking at official guidance on the 2 face covering rule that may be published shortly. And I think I am going to turn it over to Susan Klein, our interim assistant city manager, for an update on the COVID-19 vaccine.
Great, thank you, Lindsay. Good evening, everyone. I will continue with the bad news, good news storyline around vaccines. So I'm going to provide an overview of roles various levels of government agencies are playing in vaccine rollout, the status of our current situation, eligibility guidance, and finally, I'll highlight some key resources regarding vaccines. So I just want to reiterate, the vaccine is safe, effective, and free. The Federal Drug Administration that conducts rigorous trials based on decades of research before approving vaccines is the highest and most stringent standard for vaccines on the market. To date, more than 200 million Americans have been successfully vaccinated. And to ensure vaccines are free and remain accessible to everyone in our community, the federal government is actually purchasing the vaccines and allocates them to the states. The states then establish eligibility criteria and manage the distribution of vaccine supply to counties. The counties receive the vaccines directly from manufacturers that are then allotted to community vaccination sites, such as Dodger Stadium, for example, pharmacies, and private healthcare providers. Counties are also managing appointments. Here at the city, we're working diligently to secure vaccines for our frontline staff to ensure business continuity, and we can continue to provide critical and vital services. Most of our fire department has been vaccinated. They were a part of the first round of vaccinations, our paramedics and our nurses, to then in turn, they can then administer the vaccines on an ongoing basis to our staff and be a resource to the larger community. Okay, next slide, please. So, I wish I could say that we have enough vaccine doses for everyone in our community. However, as you all I'm sure keep hearing, supply is very constrained. Recently, the federal government announced the purchase of millions of doses, which we won't expect until this summer, additional purchasing. But they've also said that they've committed to a 3-week notification of distribution so that local agencies can plan ahead. 2 key areas to stay tuned in on from the state at this moment are first, eligibility details for the next group beyond phase 1B tier 1, and everyone's 65 and older. I'll get more into that in the next slide, are yet to be clarified. So stay tuned for the next phase of eligibility. And second, we're still waiting on details for the Blue Shield partnership. And once that starts to get more details, we'll certainly present that out to the community. We're all experiencing great frustration in our region due to the limited doses of vaccine. The issue is clearly supply, not capability. Los Angeles County, as you can see in this slide, has administered more doses of vaccine and has vaccinated a higher percentage of our population to date than any other large county or large city in the U.S. This bodes well for when we do get additional supply and a consistent flow of supply. Your city leadership is making every effort and remains very committed to advocating for more vaccines to our city and for a vaccination center here in Santa Monica. Next slide. So those who are currently eligible to get a vaccine include people who are 65 years and older, healthcare workers, and long-term care facility staff, as well as the residents. The next phase of eligibility is phase 1B tier 1, which includes categories covering education and child care. Of course, that includes our teachers so we can get our schools reopened, emergency services, which would include our police force, and food and agriculture, which would for us include jobs like the farmers market staff, grocery store workers, and the like. But we're, again, still waiting on more details on the next phase of categories. We expect these details and additional information on vaccine distribution in the next few weeks. Next slide. So here are two critical resources for you to stay informed when you are eligible to get the vaccine. You can go to myturn.ca.gov. This is it's very easy to do if you haven't done it already. You can do it on your phone or your computer. You will get a confirmation. It does typically take 2 to 3 days to get the confirmation, but it at least is a peace of mind, so you know that when it's your turn, when you reach an eligible phase to get vaccinated, then the state will just automatically send you a notification. And the second is when you're eligible, you can go to vaccinatelacounty.com to make an appointment. Until we get more supply, please stay diligent and patient as you navigate the appointment system, and maybe be open to traveling a bit further. I try to look at the site every day and have seen appointments open for those who are eligible. So please, I encourage you, if you're eligible, and if you're not, or if you've already been vaccinated, please encourage your family members and loved ones to get an appointment for vaccination as well. So now I'll hand it off to Stephanie for legislative updates. Thank you.
Council and Legislative Affairs Liaison, and I wanted to give you some highlights tonight of the numerous executive actions, proclamations, and other directives that President Joe Biden has taken in his first 2 weeks of office. The actions are primarily focused on addressing the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, the economy, and reversing some of former President Trump's executive actions. President Biden has mandated the use of face coverings by federal employees in all federal facilities and also on all forms of public transit, including buses, airplanes, and at airports. It is heartening to see federal mandates on some of the provisions of our own local health orders. He has also ended the discriminatory Muslim ban and the ban on transgender persons from serving in the military. Additionally, the U.S. has rejoined the Paris Climate Agreement, and science is once again at the forefront of policy decisions around climate change. Next slide. On March 27, 2020, then President Trump signed the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, which is also known as the CARES Act. It was passed by the U.S. Congress, and under that $2.2 trillion economic stimulus bill, only cities with populations over 500,000 were eligible for direct allocations from the federal government. Santa Monica had to receive a share of what was allocated to the state of California, and that amount was determined solely on our population size. Unfortunately, we received just over $1 million, which did not make a dent in our projected $224 million budget shortfall. Thankfully, a second economic stimulus package is now forthcoming. Prior to taking office, then President-elect Joe Biden in January introduced a $1.9 trillion stimulus package known as the American Rescue Plan. House and Senate leaders have indicated that they intend to use the budget reconciliation process to pass this package in the next few weeks. In that package, there's $350 billion that is earmarked in emergency funding for state and local governments like ours, and that is a dramatic increase to the $150 billion that was in the previous CARES Act under President Trump. Now, there's still a lot to be figured out. We're still awaiting details on how that money will be broken down and ultimately how much money we will see here locally. In addition to the state and local aid, there are additional funds earmarked that will help our community and our local residents. Our Big Blue Bus should see funds from the $20 billion earmarked for public transit agencies, and there is also an additional $25 billion in rental assistance, not only for renters, but also for small landlords. Additionally, unemployment benefits will be increased to $400 a week, and those will be extended through September. Next slide. There is also a plan to provide $1,400 in direct economic impact payments to eligible individuals and their families. Additionally, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP benefits, would be increased by 15% through September. Next slide. Now, we eagerly await the passage of the American Rescue Plan, and we're really asking and calling on our community today to call on our leaders in Congress to ensure the funds earmarked for state and local aid is not bargained away at the negotiating table. And additionally, that the funds that Santa Monica receives are not solely based on our population size, but rather the impacts that we've seen here locally, including our budget deficit, our local COVID case counts, and our hospitalization rate. The contact information for our two senators, Senator Dianne Feinstein and Senator Alex Padilla, and our local Congressman Ted Lieu, are up on the screen, and we encourage you to call on them to ensure that that funding is preserved. Thank you, and I will turn it back to Lane.
And we'll start, next slide, Constance. We'll start with what I've talked with some of you about, which is improvements to our customer service and our resident services. So we know from residents that there is a great desire for more prompt response to resident concerns and for our customer services systems simply to work better. Those are things we've been working on across the city, as it's also important to make sure that now that we do have a reduced city staff, that we're all working as efficiently as possible for the public good. One of the things I want to point you to, we are upgrading and enhancing the city website. So I do hope you will go to www.santamonica.gov and continue to gain familiarity with our new website. And let us know if there are improvements that you would like to see. Our next round of updates to that website will be in mid to late February, so you will continue to see improvements to that website, which is search-based and intended to provide easy information to our residents and community members. We also have reconfigured a number of counter services to try to provide contactless processes, including plan check and developer support. As we do that, that is part of overall work across the city, not only to adjust to the COVID environment, but also to make our services easier to use for everyone. Through budget adjustments made just in the past week or two, we are now working to create a 311 customer service system to provide fast access to information and support for our community members. And together with that, we are upgrading our Santa Monica Works app. The goal here is to create a combination of a web-based, mobile, and phone-based system where we know what your concerns are, where we're responding to them promptly, and where we can track the issues that are of most concern to our community members, and also ensure that if you send questions into the city, that they're resolved and responded to in a timely and courteous manner. Next slide. So we did provide a lengthy meeting on the city budget. I do want to provide the highlights here. Obviously, city budget in the current economic situation is an area that we should all be very concerned about. So the good news is that the Santa Monica budget is balanced. We are in a place of fiscal health and sustainability based on significant reductions that were made in the summer of 2020. So as many of you may recall, we did implement a nearly 25% reduction in our citywide operating and capital costs as part of the fiscal year 2020-2021 budget. The Finance Department also wisely and transparently set aside a $20 million shutdown reserve in anticipation of a winter COVID surge and second economic shutdown, which of course is what we saw in December and January of this year. So the bad news is that we will not be able to use this money for other purposes. The good news is we did not experience any unexpected revenue losses in that sense, because we had projected that it was possible to extremely likely that we would see a second surge and second winter shutdown, and the city was prepared for that. The other thing that we did last summer is to realign our city operations to operate in a pandemic environment. So our focus in this fiscal year has been emergency response, delivering foundational essential services, supporting economic recovery for businesses and families alike, and advancing racial equity. Next slide. In the mid-year budget, we were able to leverage 5 vacant police officer positions to reinvest those funds in high needs areas that were identified through customer response and concerns that were coming in. And this is something that you have seen us try to do throughout this new budget environment, is to try to find ways to look very carefully at the city budget to find opportunities and to begin adjusting and adapting to new environments. So we had to adapt to the COVID environment where city facilities would largely be closed, where many of our programs couldn't operate. And at every juncture, we have tried to see what are the needs and how can we make adjustments to try to move toward what we are seeing in this changing landscape. So in the mid-year budget, what council approved is additional resources to address homelessness, an enhancement of code enforcement services to address quality of life concerns and public health concerns, an incremental increase to create this 311 customer system to try to centralize the way we're receiving and responding to resident concerns. And that system is also part of what we heard through public safety reform, which is a desire to start moving non-emergency calls that don't require sworn response out of the police dispatch lines, which is both an efficiency matter for our city operations and a public safety and racial justice matter to make sure that we're not using sworn resources where we don't need to. Also providing eviction counseling to help tenants who risk losing their homes when rent that has been deferred due to eviction, residential eviction moratoriums becomes due, for those particularly who may be in an unemployed status given the economic impacts across the county. Also adding library page hours, which allows us both to enhance our library curbside services, but also to ensure that we're using employees at the right levels and that our library pages and others can work on providing curbside while many of our senior staff start looking at the best ways to try to reopen library services when it's safe to do so. And then finally, funding of the Inspector General position to support the new Public Safety Reform and Oversight Commission. So as many of you know well, Council did take action in January to create a Public Safety Reform and Oversight Commission, which will be working, is a civilian commission that will be working with the police department and providing oversight of the police department with the goal of co-producing public safety and ensuring that there is respect for the dignity of every person. Next slide. So where do we go next? So our community priorities survey will launch early next week at santamonica.gov. We will be getting the word out in any number of ways, and we hope that you will pay attention to that. The Community Priorities Survey is our first look at what the community needs are as we look to the fiscal year 2021 to 2023 budget. So this is the 2-year budget where we will see the community emerge from COVID, see through COVID subsiding as vaccination increases, and hopefully the reemergence not just of our economy, but also of our social and civic life. So as we look to this budget process, we will be asking the community, what are your priorities for this upcoming budget process? And we'll be asking people to try to look forward a little bit. So again, this is a 2-year budget process. The fiscal year starts July 1st. So we'll be asking people to really think about what will the priorities be in the 2 years to come, and to provide that input, which we will then provide to the City Council, who will engage in a priority setting meeting. We have tentatively scheduled for March 13th. We will get that date out. We know it's of interest to the community. We want to be sure there's plenty of time for discussion, but that date will be early to mid-March, to allow council to set their priorities for the 2021-2023 budget. And then we look to the end of May and June as the actual budget adoption process before council. So wanted to highlight this, that even right now we are starting to think about the 2-year budget process, and we hope that you will as well. Next slide. Public health enforcement has been an area of significant concern across the community. Want everyone to know that we do have public health compliance efforts going on 7 days a week, particularly targeting face coverings, our businesses, and our outdoor spaces. And again, trying to adjust our resources to areas of great need. So Lindsay mentioned earlier that TVs are not allowed in our businesses. That will be particularly important this weekend, of course. So those of you with the business community, we do hope that you will be reaching out. We are very excited to see outdoor dining reopen, and we want to see a safe Super Bowl with individuals dining outdoors with the members of their family, watching the game with members of their family, and not gathering in large groups. Very, very important for our overall economic recovery. So just asking you all to remind, particularly our restaurant owners, that big gatherings over the Super Bowl threatens a long-term loss for the county. So we really need people to comply, and we will be very focused on that on Super Bowl weekend. We've had 4 health ambassadors in place. I'm sorry, Constance, do you mind going back just one? We've had 4 health ambassadors in place since October, focusing particularly on business checks and running targeted details across the city and in our commercial districts. We've now added 5 additional health ambassadors who are fully deployed at this point, and have had at various times a focus on the pier and beach, where we do continue to see people trying to get outdoors for safe recreation, and we want to support that safe recreation by putting our enforcement officers out there to remind everyone of face covering requirements and the like. We've also added 2 code enforcement officers in the mid-year budget, to try to help us both address these public health concerns, but also address other concerns in the community, including some of the vending activity that we're seeing that is in violation of city rules and regulations. And so trying to add resources to address some of those problems, which of course co-occur and then create health and safety concerns. We've also added next slide, Constance. I think it's at the bottom of the next slide. We have added a new enforcement dashboard for those who are interested. We get questions about enforcement. The numbers are now on the coronavirus page at santamonica.gov/coronavirus. And we just want to remind you that these are the numbers at which you can report a public health concern. And our enforcement officers, of course, across public safety officers, code enforcement officers, and health ambassadors, doing everything we all can, both to be visible and also to prioritize enforcement and compliance measures in our highest priority, highest risk area. Next slide. So many questions out there about city leadership recruitments. As I believe everyone on the call knows, I have announced my family's intent to leave Santa Monica in the spring. With that, Council has appointed an ad hoc committee of Mayor Himmelrich, Councilmember Davis, and Councilmember De La Torre, who are in progress interviewing search firms to select a search firm to run the city manager recruitment. We have onboarded Ralph Anderson and Associates to conduct the police chief recruitment, and that opportunity will be posted soon. We are, however, trying to align the timing so that the new city manager will make the final determination on the police chief. And so that is why you will see future news from us once the council has approved a search firm to conduct the city manager search. We want to be sure that we are recognizing the way those two key leadership positions will work together. Next slide. So opportunities for involvement. I mentioned the community priorities survey, which we hope you will definitely participate in and remind your neighbors and those that are in your community groups to participate in. We also will be taking applications soon for the Public Safety Reform and Oversight Commission, which will be appointed by the City Council, and also for the We Are Santa Monica Fund Advisory Board. So the Public Safety Reform and Oversight Commission, which I mentioned earlier, will be 11 members appointed by the City Council. We are also creating a We Are Santa Monica Fund Advisory Board. And I'm sorry, we should have this in the slides, but the We Are Santa Monica Fund is one of our key initiatives in COVID, effectively for neighbors to help each other. So the We Are Santa Monica Fund identifies key areas of need across the community and allows residents and community members to provide financial donations to the fund, which is administered by the California Community Foundation, a 501c3, and then distributes the funds to areas of need in Santa Monica. The 5-member advisory board that we'll be appointing will advise the city manager and will ensure that the funds that are provided to the We Are Santa Monica Fund are going to the highest areas of need and of impact. We also have an opening on the personnel board for those who are interested. That is open now. And I want to remind everyone the May 31st after action review by OIR group is still in progress. 2 listening sessions have been held, and that group has reached out to community members in any ways. If you're aware of community members who want to weigh in on that process and have not yet done so, we would encourage them to email Michael Giannacco at michael.giannacco@oirgroup.com. Next slide. Upcoming key dates that we want everyone to be aware of. So our council meeting on February 9th will in part be focused on economic recovery and long-term economic recovery. So the key item before council will be a study session relating to a project that downtown Santa Monica has underway called the 3rd Street Promenade Stabilization and Economic Vitality Plan. As we look to have our commercial districts speak from and of our residents and our neighborhoods, and to have commercial districts that our residents truly love. This is a process that's looking at the promenade and saying, and really taking to heart, what can this be for our community? So this will be a first look from the City Council. It's not officially a float up, but it's a study session a little bit in that model to really receive council's input early in the process. Items would come back to council for approval as appropriate, but this is a chance for council and the community and public comment to weigh in on the promenade as we look to ensure that it is a vital place beloved by residents as we look forward to our economic recovery and to the future of the community. On February 14th, I want to let you know that the Big Blue Bus will be reinstituting fares and front door boarding. They do have new contactless options, so if you are a Big Blue Bus rider, we hope that you will be aware that that date is coming. I want to take this opportunity a little bit out of order. Susan Klein and I were with the Big Blue Bus before they rolled out at 5 o'clock this morning to talk with them about vaccination. One of the things Susan talked about that's really happening behind the scenes is our work to try to secure vaccination for our frontline essential workers and try to make sure they're receiving all the information they need about the vaccine so that we can, as quickly as we can, move to protect and provide public health for our frontline workers who have been out every day in the pandemic and their families, and also to secure public health more broadly. So as we look at the Big Blue Bus, statistics show at least 67% of our riders are essential workers. Many of our healthcare workers are transported to work by our Big Blue Bus, a huge part of what we do here in Santa Monica. So that coming from them, they also have some other good news coming along the way, but I'm going to stick with February dates for now. February 23rd, we have another important council meeting, which will be on addressing homelessness. So this will be a comprehensive look at where we are with respect to homelessness, the significant challenges that we're encountering, and what the short-term and long-term solutions that we can put in place locally and regionally to try to address this problem are. Followed by February 24th with the Chamber of Commerce, we have the State of the City, so we hope you will attend that. I will check to make sure I'm allowed to reveal the speakers on that. But we do have a very exciting speaker joining the community February 24th at State of the City with the Chamber of Commerce. And then end of February, we end with a celebration, which is the opening of historic Belmar Park, a project long in the making that we are very, very excited about. So look for that date to come. Unfortunately, we will be in virtual celebration stage, but we are really looking forward to the opening of that new public space for Santa Monica. Next slide. And I hope you'll also look out for our Black History Month events. Delana Benacama gave a fantastic presentation at Council on all of the events to come, again, capstoned by Historic Belmar Park at the end of February. But we do hope you'll join us for these events, and we will make the slides available so you can see them in a slightly larger font. The Greens Festival being one of our longtime favorites, and is coming in February as well. I'm sorry, even with my glasses, I can't read those. Next slide. So lots of ways to stay informed. Our goal here really is to provide you with information. Like I said, we welcome your feedback on what would be helpful in this format. We received positive response from the first one. We know that we only want so many meetings in the evening. We will make the slides available, but wanted to provide a lot of this information, and we are happy to answer any questions. And Anuj, I'll turn to you for the questions.
Thank you, Wayne, and thanks everybody. So I wanted to just remind folks, if they do have questions, to please go ahead and type those in the chat in your Blue Jeans window. We'll be monitoring those and be able to pose them regarding anything that you heard from any of my colleagues today, or other topics related to happenings in the city and in the community that you'd like more information on. So we don't have a whole lot as yet, but one that I will tee up for my new colleague in the city manager's office for Susan Klein is, will you be meeting with residents in your new role?
Thanks, Anuj. Sure. I will definitely be available to, come to any community groups or, businesses or organizations that would like to hear from me. The two areas, I think it's important to let everyone know that the two primary areas that I'm focusing on initially are, one is clearly vaccination rollout. So I'm very happy and eager to attend as many community meetings as possible to get the word out on vaccinations and give status updates on where we're at, what we're doing, and how the community can access and plan for vaccinations, and also reopening. It was a significant effort when we went through the reductions in staff and some of the services that we've provided to the community for so long. And it's going to take some time to thoughtfully reopen as resources become available in the budget and also staffing wise. So I think that'll be a critical area from that I'll need to hear from the business community, from the residents on, in terms of, you know, what you're missing most, what are priorities for our community members with regard to reopening. So I'll leave it at that. I don't know, Lane, if there's anything you would want to add, but I think those are two key areas that I would definitely love to speak to more community groups about.
I definitely agree with that, Susan. And I think, you know, one of the challenges we're going to have is we're operating, you know, at a 25% citywide reduction from where we were the last time that the city was truly open. And that has already required a tremendous amount of work to make sure that we have as many community services as we can, and that work will be ongoing. And so that is one of the challenges that we all together will be encountering.
So we have one more that's come in with regards to the project at Lincoln in Colorado, the former Denny's site. A resident asks that the work there may have ceased, and if that is in fact the case, if work has stopped, would the city take over the property as abandonment?
So thank you for the question. I'm going to give you the information that I have. It is a couple of days old, but I believe it still to be accurate. So there was an article in the Santa Monica Observer that stated that construction had stopped. What I understand from our planning staff is that project, and for those who aren't familiar with it, it's at the northwest corner of Lincoln in Colorado, the former Denny's space. It's being developed by WNMS to contain 100 residential units and approximately 13,000 square feet of ground floor commercial space. Staff did reach out following reports that construction had ceased and was informed that there was an issue that caused progress to slow, but that it has been resolved and the developer does intend to move forward and complete construction. So, and the Building and Safety Division has also confirmed that building inspections have been occurring on a regular basis. So we will continue to watch the property, but we do believe that construction was slowed rather than stopped on that project. And Nancy will continue to provide updates if that information changes.
So we have another question that came in with regards to the requirements for outdoor fitness, with regards to face coverings, distancing, and whether that can happen on public streets or only on their own parking lots.
Lindsay, do you know, are you able to answer that question?
So, Anush, can you repeat it again? Face coverings for outdoor fitness and parking lots and other public spaces, is that correct?
Yeah, so I think the question was just wanting more clarity on the general requirements for outdoor fitness with regards to face coverings, distancing, and whether they can take place, you know, on public streets or only on their own parking lot.
Correct. So for face coverings first, face coverings are required of our outdoor fitness users as well as the staff members. If you see a violation of that, please don't hesitate to report it to the resources that Lane provided or via Santa Monica Works using the Others tab. We want to know that information. Even if those engaging in exercise are doing heavy exertion, they need to alter their activity so that they can continue to wear a face covering at all times. For those that are using public sidewalks, we'd also like to know that information to make sure that they're complying with the outdoor use permits that are in place for parking lot use. Those that are in parks also have to go through the Community Services Department's permitting process for outdoor space. They should have signage up, and the coach or the fitness instructor should also have a badge to identify that they're permitted. If you see any complaints, again, please report them to our code enforcement team at info@smgov.net or via Santa Monica Works using the other tab.
Great, thank you, Lindsay. Another question is with regards to the city website. Will it restore the link to city recognized neighborhood organizations as in the new website design, the page can only be found on the search function?
So the website design is being redone, and we expect the upgrades to go up in February. I don't know that the date that the neighborhood associations will go up, or but I don't have any reason to believe that they wouldn't go up in one of the areas. So why don't we can certainly get back to you on that question. I don't know whether that would plan to go up in February, but if it's still up on the website, generally that information would be transferred to the new format. And I should say the way the website is working right now is that we are trying to make sure all of the information is still available through the search function while they bring up more and more pages. So instead of going down all at once and coming back up later, we are trying to build this out as we go to provide the new digital services that community members are relying on right now. Which is a long way of saying we have a little bit of a mishmash between santamonica.gov and smgov.net. If one page hasn't been transferred to the new format, it's still accessible on smgov.net and through that search function, even while we're transferring the information into the new format. And we also received, I believe, a question about the Ocean Avenue Bikeway. And Elizabeth, I believe this one came from you. And I think Francie spoke with you at the Wilmot meeting. She is going to be the best authority on this. But what I certainly can tell you is that the Ocean Avenue Bikeway was part of the 2017 Downtown Community Plan and Bike Action Plan Amendment. And initial funding was budgeted in the fiscal year 2018 to 2020 budget. What we did during COVID was under general direction to try to provide more outdoor space for outdoor dining and recreation. We moved forward with this project. I want to fully acknowledge that the project should have had more community engagement, and that is absolutely a lesson learned here. I know that Francie is working with you and others to try to hear the concerns and address them with respect to circulation in that area. And I do know that Ed King, the department director, is also aware of the concerns. So we will continue to engage with you and try to address those. And I should add, I believe some of the funding for this came from economic recovery as opposed to it being authorized by an emergency order. It was the funding that came from some of the economic recovery.
Thanks, Lane. So we actually do not have any other questions that have come in as yet. We do obviously have a little bit more time scheduled for this community briefing. So if anyone does have any further questions, please feel free to use the chat function or the Q&A function. We've received a couple of questions through both of those means in the BlueJeans interface, and we're monitoring. So we're here and ready to answer any other additional questions that you may have. I think everybody's ready to go have their dinner.
Yep. Good. Well, thank you for joining us tonight. And as I said at the beginning, we're open to feedback on what would be useful during this time in particular. We want to do everything we can to provide information to you. So thanks for joining us this evening.